Welcome to day 209 of our 2020 Focus Bible reading. We are on Hebrews chapter 11. This is the faith chapter in the New Testament, and it is an important point within this letter that we know as the book of Hebrews. And this is what we read. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offering. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God, and without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place where he would later receive his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking he did receive Isaac back from the dead. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons, and worshipped as he leaned on top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell, after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, and about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. All right, so just an awesome chapter. Just all the different stories of faith. Reading this chapter, I think through pretty much my Sunday school experience growing up, because these stories were just told and retold and retold. They're just such a part of my spiritual heritage. They're part of, obviously, the heritage of the Hebrew people, and it's so powerful to see them all put together in one place. Now, remember when we left chapter 10. Chapter 10 ends with that we don't belong to those who shrink back. That they shrink back from faith. We belong to a people who have moved forward in faith. And then chapter 11 is a description of how they moved forward with faith, trust, and confidence in God. That they had an allegiance to God that transcended all of the circumstances around them. And he gives an incredible list of those people, and in powerful ways, giving us the story, going all the way from Genesis and all the way up. And he said, to David, he doesn't even have, the time to go into every different aspect of the people who had been faithful in spite of their circumstances. And it's just a great passage to reinforce your faith, especially when you're going through difficult times. And so I would just encourage you to take some time and reread this, because there is power in these words and reminders of faith. We have a great cloud of witnesses who are faithful, and we should be faithful as well. And there's one section in here, and I want to find it. Of course, I didn't mark it when I was going through it, so yeah, I knew I would pass by it because it was right in the midst. See if I can find it. Sorry, you have to scroll with me. I hope I'm not making you sick. I love the description of Abraham that we read, that he was as good as dead when God used him to help bring about the promise. I think that's an amazing an amazing statement about somebody who was just in their old age. We had Diane and I went on a cruise actually the year before Caleb was born. We got to go on an Alaskan cruise. And while we were there, we were sitting in dinner every evening with a British couple, and the woman, the conversation turned to age, and nobody asked, but she said, "You don't have to ask my age. I'm past my sell-by date." And for the longest time, we couldn't figure out what she was saying. And she said she's past her sell-by date, like the things we get in the grocery store that are, sell by this date. She says, I'm way past my sell-by date. And I thought that was just a great, a great way to describe it. Verse 6. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. I think that is, if there's a part of this chapter that you want to stick in your memory, I think it's that part. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Why? Because anyone who comes to him must believe two things. One, that he exists, and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. That he's a God who pays attention, that when we actually seek him, he pays attention to that. Think about that. With all the human beings on planet Earth, God is paying attention to whether you earnestly seek him or not. that gets his attention. That's an amazing thing. And we see this in the life of Jesus, that when the centurion expressed faith in Jesus, it astonished him. Like Jesus was astonished with the faith of the centurion, because that centurion was turning to him and earnestly seeking him. And that makes all the difference. And it still holds true that when we turn to God in faith, one, we have to trust that he's willing to receive us. I mean, that's understanding his character. Then we earnestly seek him, and that we know he rewards that he's going to respond to us seeking him. And then we're just given a litany of all the people who did that. And I just think it's a really powerful chapter within the book of Hebrews. It's great. It holds up through the centuries, because those stories are stories of faith that we should be using as inspiration for us to place our faith in God. And I love what he says there at the end. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us they may be made perfect. That this idea of these people operated, and they didn't even, they looked forward. We have the privilege of being able to look back and say, and look what God has done. And we get to be a part of the fulfillment of that promise. And now we still live in a day where we're looking forward to Christ's return. I mean, we're in a similar thing in that regard, in that we're looking forward. But we also have the power of looking back and seeing that God always fulfills his promise. All right, that's it for today. We will see you tomorrow for chapter 12.